motion as soon as possible under Section 13 and make the argument for the withdrawal and so on. So she hasn't come back with the deal. She hasn't put forward a motion under Section 13. So I suspect, Mr. Speaker, that our European friends may find that when they look at the detail of this, that they've been rather gravely misled into actually the Council decision that they made. We know that they are very angry at the way in which the Prime Minister negotiated the deal, which she then sought to renege on by, for example, supporting the Brady Amendment. So I'm sure that what has been going on, and we'll get more of it next week perhaps when we've defeated this motion tonight, but I suspect the Prime Minister now really needs to concentrate on delivering the will of the British people and allowing no deal on the 12th of April to proceed.
Sorry, not a quiet start on my part there,
Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to follow
I was not quite believing what I was hearing.
I don't agree with much of what he says, but I will say
the link
this
I'm sharing is another
favour.
YouTube live stream. However, the BBC Parliament,
with the arguments that he has made,
the UK Parliament one that is going to follow is half an hour behind.
This is a bad deal,
which means that following things live,
he and I will be in the same lobby tonight, perhaps for some different reasons, but at least he, as I say, has been consistent, and indeed much of what he says about this deal, I do agree with him for, and apparently honourable members now decry that. It is quite bizarre, Mr. Speaker, and forgive me, I'm repeating comments that I made only a few days ago, that honourable members think it is entirely proper and indeed honourable that they should be allowed to change their vote and to change their minds,
the Northern Irish are
British
fucking
people exactly the same right on this matter of Brexit. And I gently, the honourable gentleman for Spalding and the DPs is one such honourable member who voted against the Prime Minister's deal, but now has voted for it, and again he's going to go and vote for it tonight. Mr. Speaker, in all the shameful shenanigans that have embraced Brexit, I think we've sunk to real depths, if I may say, today. And I want to explain why that is. It really isn't good enough.
Some of this is quite funny to watch, and some of it's just kind of like, oh dear.
As we have heard, that they are now going to vote for the deal, not because they think that it might actually be rather good for our country or rather good for our constituents, but because it will stop. Oh, I see, Mr. Speaker, I've got your note. I've got 4 minutes, but he's not listening, and I shall carry on. I will take an intervention, but not yet, because I want to make this point. To say that you're going to now back the deal because it will stop an extension, even though the government's made it very clear that no more further extensions would be allowed, is, if I may say,
let's back the deal, despite the fact you said it's a fucking awful deal and no one should ever have even proposed
European
such a
parliamentary elections. These aren't good reasons. Other honourable members opposite have said they'll
Mogg,
vote for the Prime Minister's deal
basically just
on the basis that
traitor
the
to his own
Prime
cause.
Minister will stand down. That isn't acting with honour. That isn't acting.
Oh yeah, and freedom is. I'll quit if you let it through, guys. Honest.
With the right honourable lady, my friend, as she remains and always will for Witham. At least she has been true to her principles, and she stands and she says she will not vote for this deal, and she says quite rightly she'll be held to account by her constituents, and I congratulate her for that. We don't always agree, and we don't agree on this, but on many points we do agree as to why this withdrawal agreement is bad for our country, and I pay tribute to the DUP. Mr. Speaker, as individuals, the honourable gentleman at the front decries that. He hasn't even let me finish my sentence.
Alright, you might say you've got your agreement, and that it's meant to satisfy us.
As individuals, I find most of them pleasant.
It puts us outside your fucking country, being the gist of it.
Honourable members who sit here have been consistent, and on this I absolutely agree with them.
It's for their greater good. We just have to get rid of you.
It's a genuine threat to the union of the United Kingdom. I genuinely do believe that. It's one of the reasons why I am in fear of this agreement. I believe it is a threat to Northern Ireland and its relationship as part of our United Kingdom. I believe the same is true in Scotland. I believe that Brexit will actually increase the desire of the Scottish people to break away from the Union and strike out by themselves, because they will see a future as a member of the European Union being denied because of Brexit as a member of the United Kingdom, and in Wales too, where we know that the number of Remain voters continues now to grow. Mr. Speaker, I agree with the comments of the Right Honourable Learned Gentleman for Beaconsfield, Leicester West, the Honourable Lady, and indeed for Leeds East, when they talk about how this particular motion will actually make the certainty that British businesses are crying out for even less achievable because of the division between the political declaration and the withdrawal agreement. And it is so regrettable, given that we've started finally on a process of indicative vote, something that, as you know, many of us, Mr. Speaker, were crying out for.
He makes Doom sound like his voice hasn't broken yet. It's amazing. Has it cut out? An error has occurred. Alright, let's refresh that.
Speaker, I finish by saying this.
There you go.
What sort of country have we become post the referendum? Are we a better country? Are we a happier country? Are we a more united country? Or is the absolute reality of it that we are not just as divided as we were in June 26, but even more divided? And change will come because change has to come. Because British politics is broken. And, Mr. Speaker, we're seeing that change. I've left the Conservative Party with 2 others. I think more will follow. I think we will see the breakup of the 2 parties. And I'm delighted today that the group that I've joined with members from formerly of the Labour Party has now today formed itself into a new political party that will change the face and direction of British politics. That's why we call ourselves Change.org. And I believe that is what the British people are crying out for. Leadership, honesty, integrity, and a new way of doing politics. That's the only good thing that will come out of the Brexit chaos.
Thank you.
Right, so you want to form an independent
now,
party.
please. Mr. Owen Patterson.
Wait for that.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. I will be brief. Pleasure to meet the Honourable Lady.
Why are you leaving the party then? The party seemed quite happy
I admire her
remain.
consistency, but she won't agree with what I'm about to say. I'm afraid I didn't agree with what she said. Because this, Mr. Speaker, is a very simple question of democracy, sovereignty and accountability. That is why 17.4 million people voted to leave. They were told, you are sovereign, you make a decision, the Commons, as elected, will interpret that. They trusted us. They trusted us to deliver what they voted for. They will be bitterly disappointed. At 11 o'clock tonight, we should be leaving. And we won't be leaving.
It's going to be a long stream then if it's got to be up till 11.
That is a terrible blow to the integrity of their trust in us. On this side, it was very clear in our manifesto we would interpret leave to leave the single market, leave the customs union, leave the remit your court of justice. The Labour Party pretty well said the same thing. And we know that over 2/3 of members in this House represent seats which said leave. 494 and 498 members voted for the second and third readings to trigger Article 50. At that stage, perhaps members opposite were sort of stunned by the effect of the referendum, but now I am amazed by the nature of these debates. There was a sense that that enormous vote, that enormous expression of popular demand has faded into the past. It's a bit embarrassing. It's a bit like a bad smell at a dinner party. I press on, other members want to speak. Let's push on. And it is live. Those people are out there. They believe that this should happen, and they believe we should deliver it. And it's not going back. This cannot be put back in the bottle and screwed away and hidden in a cupboard or put in the fridge. This huge vote will continue. This will continue to dominate our politics. This issue is not going away. So when we look at the detail of what's being proposed, it is extraordinary. The 5th largest economy in the world is proposing to have laws imposed upon it by 27 other countries, many of whom are competitors, who have no incentive to pass law in our interest. We won't be present when the law is made. We won't be able to amend that law. We won't be able to repeal that law. And if we don't apply that law to the satisfaction of the European Commission and ultimately the European Court of Justice, as we saw in the UQ last week, we are subject to unlimited fines, disallowance in EU speak. We have the horror of Northern Ireland. The whole basis of getting the unionist population to vote for the Belfast Agreement was the principle of consent. It was an extraordinarily successful campaign by my noble friend, Lord Trimble. It was an amazing effort to get unionists to vote for it. The basis was trust, that the status of Northern Ireland could not be changed. And yet we're going to have something horrible called UKNI, which is actually even in breach of the Acts of Union of 1801. So trust and democracy. I'm sorry, others want to speak. This is about trust and democracy. And the last key point, the absolute key point, is that what we're seeing today does not deliver. It does not deliver on the referendum. It does not deliver on those manifesto commitments. It does not deliver what's promised through all those debates. And when it comes down to trust, I represent a Leave constituency. I was quite clear to my constituents what I was going to do. They will think it's perverse that I voted twice against this agreement. Why on earth would I, under pressure, change my mind today? So I will maintain my integrity and reputation, intending to campaign and continue. We may lose this particular battle, but ultimately we will get back the sovereignty of this country so people can make decisions.
BNC Lucas. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a pleasure to follow the right honourable gentleman from North Shropshire, with whom I disagree, but that will not surprise him. I did, however, vote with him for Article 50 2 years ago, and in that debate and in that speech, I spoke to the Prime Minister and I said that she needed to reach out across the chamber to create consensus on Brexit. I also spoke to colleagues in the Labour Party that they needed to reach out to find consensus on Brexit too. Since that day, we have had no consensus at all from the Prime Minister. And that is why, on March the 29th, today, the last day, we are having this debate now. Now, what I want to do is commend the right honourable gentleman, the member for West Dorset, for the procedure that he started and we managed to get through earlier this week, and which I think really brings us forward for the first time in a long time to trying to find a solution to this very difficult problem. Because it is a hugely difficult problem. There are questions about democratic legitimacy. There are important issues which divide fundamentally all of our constituents. And we know that different people, for different people, Brexit means different things. And what we must do as parliamentarians on each side of the chamber is seek consensus. So that meant, for me, earlier this week, for the first time, I actually supported the Beckett amendment, which supported a referendum, which I have been very, very reluctant to do, because I've come round to the position adopted by the right honourable member for Rushcliffe that referendums are very bad things, upon which he has been sensibly consistent for a very, very long period. But what we don't have today is a solution.
Referendums are bad things.
A solution before us. Because what we have
I just don't have much to say at some of these points.
I must confess, I contemplated at one stage. Can we? In fact, I discussed it with the shadow gentleman, the shadow member for Brexit, spokesman for Brexit. Yeah, please don't interrupt me. So I did consider this myself, but then I looked at the law, and what the law says in the European Union Withdrawal Act is that these issues have to be considered together. Yeah. And also, what the Prime Minister has consistently said until she has reached the last day is that these issues must be considered together. And what we have also seen is a beauty parade by cynical individuals who are seeking personal advancement within the Conservative Party, reversing their position today because their competitors have reversed their position, and the honest challenges that we are seeking as members of Parliament are not being supported. So what we need to do, and what I will do, is vote against this motion today, and I will then, on Monday, be looking for consensus so that this Parliament can begin to take back control and act responsibly in a way that this Prime Minister has singularly failed to do. We could have achieved consensus across these benches months, even years ago. The Prime Minister has not sought it. Parliament needs to do that now.
Rebecca Powell. very much, Mr. Speaker, and I rise to support this motion, but I've been driven to speak, and I haven't spoken in many of these debates before. We've heard time and time again from all the same people, but not much from what I call the voices of reason. So I'm speaking, Mr. Speaker, because I am exasperated, and I am fed up with the bickering that has gone on in this House. It cannot be beyond the wit of the men and women of this great place to come to a decision that puts the good of the nation first. Every single day of obfuscation, and I can't say that very well because I'm so exasperated, causes more difficulties for the businesses of this country. We rely on these businesses to fuel our economy, to give us jobs so that people can work and then we can pay taxes and we can have the public services that we need. And a recent straw poll that I undertook of businesses clearly highlights they want a decision, they want it now, and they do not want it in a year's time. And so many individuals seem to confess they don't understand half of what we're debating in this place, and the other half of them wish they'd never heard of it all. So I don't profess to be legal, but what I do know is that we have to make a decision. 52% of people in Taunton Deane voted out, 48% voted leave, and I said I would respect this decision. I've moved my position from being Remain, and I am putting the country first. Very, very quickly, because of the time.
In giving way. Others have said there's a cynical reason for people moving their position. I resigned in November from all government positions and party positions when I saw the legal risk on the backstop. However, now there is a bigger risk with regards to not delivering Brexit at all, and the country's interest comes first. Does you agree with that?
Absolutely, 100% I agree with you. And yes, 17.4 million people voted that they wanted to leave. Yes, there was a roar for change, but 16.8 million gave a yell to be noticed as well. So that does indicate that we do need to have compromise. We've had nearly 3 years of debate in this place.
This is far too late to be having this conversation.
How many people have really changed their position? The polarisation is quite
we need another referendum, guys.
So today, let's demonstrate that we can move one small step for Parliament and one giant step for the UK and the men and women of this nation by passing the withdrawal agreement, the legally binding agreement that sets out the UK's departure from the EU bloc, that fits with the EU rules, and the longer extension that was agreed to May the 22nd. It is a legal right, as the Attorney General clearly outlined, and it takes us straight to the bill, which was also touched on by the member from Chingford.
We should leave today, but we need to leave in a year's time.
That both Labour
I feel like I'm missing something with these
committed
political arguments.
honouring the results of the referendum. And I ask right honourable and honourable members and friends from both sides, can we really countenance voting against Brexit on the day Brexit was meant to be Brexit? I find it extraordinary. By setting out the agreement from the political declaration that sets out the framework for the future relationship, we can go on to continue to discuss what type of Brexit we really want, and it has to be something that we can all live with. I still firmly believe the PM's deal was a good one. She has fought doggedly and determinedly. I don't think anyone can disagree with that. And I believe she's come up with a very comprehensive deal and that it fundamentally is good. But I did vote in the indicative votes, and actually I did maybe what people might think is a bit of a strange thing. I voted aye to two completely contrasting things. One was a closer relationship with the Customs Union, and one was a relationship for the EEA EFTA, because I just felt that I had to indicate that, you know, we do need to come to a consensus in this place. Neither were my favourites. Neither, I think, are as good as the Prime Minister's deal.
Oh, God, what?
But for today, let's
Why would you say that?
Over the line. Let's discuss all the other permutations later. Let's demonstrate to the nation that we can all work together at least for today. Let's make it step by step. And I've always said, I say this to my children, to my husband, who is not very well, who is watching this at home. Step by step, all things are possible. And as the sun shines down on a glorious spring day in Taunton Deane,
Oh, sorry about that.
Sunshine to the rest of the nation.
I was not expecting that as the end of that speech.
And it is an honour to follow the honourable member for Taunton Deane. Another day, another Brexit vote, which isn't quite the Brexit vote we need, doesn't quite have the numbers it needs to win, doesn't quite give constituents, companies or our 4 countries the certainty they require, yet here we are again.
It's quite amusing earlier watching the amount of people who are just sitting there on their phones.
With the Tory Westminster
On
government
both
behaving like
sides,
Olympian
on both,
gods,
you know,
as though our constituents,
representative
many of
primary
whom have
genders, whatever the
livelihoods
fuck you call it.
depend on our relationship with Europe,
And
as
it's
though
just like,
we
ooh.
were mere pawns in their chess game. They insist on bringing forward meaningful votes after vote after vote, knowing that they produce absolutely nothing.
Come on, guys,
but
it's
pretending
only
as if
meaningful
they were
if we
doing
vote on it
something.
like a
This is nothing
shitload
more
of
than
times.
deceit, duplicity and deception from a government in desperation. And then the Prime Minister has the audacity to go on national television and blame us, members of this House, for her failure as head of state to govern. Mr. Speaker, we are ensnared in a morass of procedural minutiae and twists and turns of Byzantine complexity, a 6-volume Gibson's Decline and Fall of the British Empire, played out in painfully tedious slow motion in what used to be held in respect as the mother of parliaments.
Well said.
And we cannot discuss the failure of this House without turning to the benches on this side. We were so helpfully reminded this week, everyone was reminded, Labour is not a Remain party, and don't we know it? If the Labour Party had done its sole job and opposed any of the disastrous moves by this government, and not simply closed its eyes and wished upon its negotiation-free Brexit, we would now have a clear way forward. We will not be clinging on to the whims of the ERG and the intransigency of the DUP. Alas, for as long as we stick to this archaic, dysfunctional Westminster system, we are stuck with Her Majesty's opposition, complicit with Her Majesty's government. I will be
Grateful to the Honourable Lady for giving way. She mentions the ERG. If Her Majesty's government had followed the whims of the ERG, we would be in a much better position today.
Oh look, the traitor!
And of course,
Is time for that yet, Jacob? Did you watch us on the
the ERG do what suits best for them. And the ERG are, of course, as we are seeing, many of them allowed to change their opinion. If only the people of the nations of the United Kingdom were allowed as much as well. But, and I would say this to Labour, if Wales leaves Europe because of Labour members, Labour fiefdom in Wales is at an end. If Labour abandons the interests of Wales, Wales will abandon Labour. This House, at the behest of both the Brexiteering unionist parties, has so far failed to make any decision about any decisions, about our future relationship with the European Union. The blame is at their door. We have suggested ways forward to marshal decision-making, with my honourable friend, the member for Carmarthen East and Dunevor, suggesting indicative votes, using an alternative voting system to decide how we proceed. This was first raised weeks upon weeks ago, way back before the government lost its first meaningful vote. If the Prime Minister had pulled her fingers out of her ears and listened to anyone other than the privileged elite of the ERG and the DUP, the elite of the Brexiteers, we could have used the last 2.5 months to make some progress, decide on what the House thinks is the best way to move forward, and simply get on with it. And
oh, she said the word, she said the word.
It cannot be said often enough. How often is the Prime Minister going to game democracy for her own purpose? How many ERGers will switch their votes and their previous principles on the most spurious of thin reasons? Will they not open their eyes and see that representative parliamentary democracy in this place has stalled? And if it's good enough for the Tories to have multiple shots, how do they have the nerve to argue that the people are somehow unworthy of a final say referendum?
There she makes a good point there, to be honest.
Our salvation in public democracy.
We can my own opinions, but,
we are where we are because of this tin-eared, time-wasting, timorous British government, hell-bent on putting its own interests before the interests of farmers, factory workers and families across the UK. If this is the best the Commons can cobble together, we are in serious trouble. Britain is broken, and Westminster is simply not working. The people of Wales deserve better than this failed empire of a union.
They're arguing whether they should be even bothering to empty out the boat at all, though.
are rotten, and Wales must look to Europe and to ourselves for salvation.
Why?
John Barron.
You've not been a successful independent country for how many thousand years?
I voted against meaningful vote 1 and 2, and I will be voting against meaningful vote 3
Wales can't exactly talk too much on the front of having independence when wanting to join a bigger union.
No matter how it's dressed up by the government, this is a vote on the Prime Minister's withdrawal agreement.
Parliament of England, for the most
part, I think it's a bad deal, a very, very bad deal. And I think part of the reason we've arrived at this point in which the House cannot support the deal is because the negotiating team saw Brexit as a problem to be solved rather than an opportunity to be seized upon. And furthermore, they never convinced the EU that we were prepared to walk away. And in any negotiation, if the other side really don't think you're prepared to walk away, it makes for a worse deal.
That is correct.
And I sympathise very much with my colleagues, particularly those who voted Brexit, because this is a very difficult
I would put it up on stream,
decision.
But all you'll see
to choose
is the
between the devil and the deep blue sea is never easy. But I've decided again to vote against this meaningful vote because it is such a disastrous deal. It's a disastrous deal on 2 fronts. And it's if I may, no, I'm going to make progress, and I'll tell you why. If I have time, if I finish beforehand, I will take the intervention. But a lot of people want to speak, a lot of members want to speak in this debate. But there are 2 central questions that the government has continued to fail to answer.
Anymore?
The first was raised by our friends, the DUP, who made it very clear that actually the meaningful vote would put a border, an internal border, within the United Kingdom. And it's not just the DUP who believe this, it is all the unionist parties in Northern Ireland. And we should not take that lightly. It would actually threaten our United Kingdom. But I also suggest, Mr. Speaker, there's a further reason. I think we should be wary of this agreement tonight, and that is, it is very possible, I'm not going to take an intervention from the front bench that has negotiated a disastrous deal for us, and it's as simple as that, I'm sorry. No, I'm not. I do apologize. That's very kind, very kind. Go on then, I'll give way, go on then. No, actually, I won't give way to the right. I did promise the right honourable gentleman there, or the gentleman there.
The honourable gentleman says he believes this is a bad deal. At a time when business investment is at its lowest, why does he think that all manufacturing industries believe that this is a good deal that should be supported?
Because he will remember, as I do, the dire predictions that if we voted to leave in 2016 that never materialised. They were so poor that actually the Bank of England and many others had to publicly apologise, and since then we've seen record low unemployment, record high manufacturing output and record investment, and those decisions in recent years have been made on the basis that we could be leaving on no deal WTO terms. But, Mr. Speaker, the second reason I'm going to continue for a little bit. The second reason I'm going to be voting against this agreement tonight is because of the indefinite nature of the backstop. I fully agree with those who say there's a need for compromise. I do not like the transition arrangement. But I can hold my nose to it because, in a sense, it's no worse than being in the EU. But what I find very difficult to swallow is the indefinite nature of the backstop, because I can't imagine there'd be anybody in this place who would enter a very serious legal arrangement, an agreement that only gave the key to exit to the other party. And we could be locked in this backstop indefinitely. That is not delivering on the results of the EU referendum. It's not delivering on the extension or the triggering of Article 50. It's not delivering on the referendum, on the general election result, in which both parties committed to honouring the referendum in their manifestos. So, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, Article 50 we triggered. The legal default position of that triggering, and we passed it by 384 majority, is that we would leave with or without a deal. Monday's motions are going to be addressing the central issue of whether we leave on WTO terms if we cannot pass the Prime Minister's deal today, and I'd encourage the House to give it consideration.
Mark Hendrick.
Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to follow the member for Basildon and Billericay, who I've jousted with on many an occasion in the Foreign Affairs Committee. But as you'd expect, Mr. Speaker, my views are very different, although we draw the same conclusion on this deal today. I will be voting against this deal today because I believe it is a trap, and a final attempt by the Prime Minister to leave us in a situation where it will be her deal or no deal.
Is it really bad that I can just hear this guy's voice as Benny Hill?
On the 22nd of May, should this deal pass today, but hopefully it won't. During the last 2 years, 18 months has been wasted because the Prime Minister would not discuss with Parliament nor her government what was being discussed and negotiated with the EU. After 18 months, the Prime Minister produced the so-called Chequers Plan, which was roundly rejected by many of her own MPs as well as other members of Parliament. That plan formed the basis for negotiations, leading to the resignations of Cabinet Ministers and deep divisions in the party opposite. The stubbornness of the Prime Minister in running down the clock has left us in the embarrassing position and situation that we are in today. Still, we are debating this on the day that we were due to leave the European Union. Mr. Speaker, let me discuss the separation of the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration, because the way that this has been put forward today would seem to me to be a blank cheque, if it's passed, for the new Conservative Prime Minister to put through what I would regard as a hard-right Brexit deal through in the future. And we can already see the leadership candidates trying to outright each other, look more to the right than each other, in the run-up to a competition which I believe has already started, and started from the moment the Prime Minister issued her resignation at the 1922 committee. And what we will see is whatever is agreed by this government, and particularly by a new Prime Minister, is some hard-right version, possibly a Canada-style international trade agreement. And, Mr. Speaker, I'm a member now of the International Trade Committee, and I've seen the International Trade Secretary talk about rollovers, and the EU currently has something like 40 international trade agreements. And at the moment, only 8 of those look in any way, shape or form as though they could possibly be rolled over. And if we look at who they're with, very, very minor countries, none of which are of the size and mass of the market that we face in the European Union. And the European Union are still,
there's no possibility that we could do any form of trade without the EU.
Will be the
Ignore
major
all the other countries in the world and not
irrespective
the
of what
EU.
many of the Brexiteers and flat earthers on the other side of this chamber will say. Now, to consider this motion in isolation,
did you catch that one? The Brexiteers and flat earthers on the other side of the chamber.
To actually
what did he mean by this?
Make a mess of our relations in terms of trade with the rest of the world. I think investment decisions, location is key, and the businesses at the moment, irrespective of what the Attorney General said earlier on, is actually going to upset a lot of businesses. And it's not just about when we leave, it's about how we leave. The deal is key, and that's why I think the indicative process that we've already started was important, and I think what we do on Monday is key. But I will be voting down with other colleagues this deal today in the hope that we can get a good agreement on Monday. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
3-minute limit now applies. Mr. David Jones.
Speaker, today's debate is proceeding for one reason only. It's not being held, as my right honourable friend the Attorney General acknowledged, with a view to delivering a positive, meaningful vote for the purposes of the Act. Indeed, it's hard to see how another meaningful vote could be held, since there has been no change whatever to the withdrawal agreement, which was so convincingly rejected by this House only 2 weeks ago. The European Union has made it clear that the withdrawal agreement cannot be reopened, and you yourself, Mr. Speaker, have made it absolutely clear that you would not countenance the last rejected motion being put to the House again. So the motion before us today does not fulfil the statutory requirements of the Act. We are being asked to approve it for one reason only, and that is to keep the clock ticking, to ensure that that can that has been so repeatedly kicked doesn't complete its progress down the road on the 12th of April, but bumps along a bit until the 22nd of May. And to be fair to the government, they're openly acknowledging that that is the case. But they're also saying, ostensibly and illogically, that today we are considering the withdrawal agreement separately from the political declaration. That is not the case, Mr. Speaker. It's illogical to say that, because the political declaration is incorporated by reference into the body of the withdrawal agreement. It's there in black and white in Article 184. So in reality, we are considering the political declaration today. We're in reality considering the whole package that we rejected by 149 votes only a few days ago. Mr. Speaker, this was to be the day when we celebrated or lamented, whichever is our point of view, the departure of the United Kingdom from the European Union. It could have been the moment when we put the travails of the last 3 fractious years behind us. But we are not. Humiliatingly, we are going through today's exercise because the government has been told by the European Union that we have until the 22nd of May to sign up to the withdrawal agreement, but only if it's approved by this House by 11 o'clock tonight. Mr. Speaker, if anything had changed, I would have been inclined possibly to consider supporting the motion today. If it had changed like Keynes, I might have been prepared to consider changing my own mind. But nothing has changed, and therefore I won't. The truth is that we're being asked to approve this agreement to buy the government another 40 days, and what a dreadful 40 days it would be. 40 days of increasing frustration for the British people who are wondering why the steeple bells are not pealing out this evening. Mr. Speaker, it's time to bring this miserable business to an end. It's time to deliver Brexit, and I therefore urge all honourable members to oppose this motion this evening.
Sourest face like she just inhaled
There
a
was a time
truckload
when
of lemons.
Brexit meant Brexit. These days it seems to mean chaos. This grand plan to demonstrate that the UK has been Gulliver imprisoned in Lilliput for the last 46 years has fallen apart and is broken. And to deal with that Buruk, we have a government so dysfunctional, so bereft of talent and so lacking in trust, the Prime Minister has given up trying to appoint ministers. Its only saving grace is it's opposed by an official loyal opposition that seems incapable of doing anything that might actually help and seems completely at odds with itself. Today we have a Prime Minister who thinks no will turn to yes if you only
Even
just
if you don't
ask
agree with
half
them,
of
this
the
is
question,
a great spectator.
served by a cabinet that includes one minister who thought it appropriate to tell a journalist, I'm past caring, it's like the living dead in here. Now I suspect that might have been the Prime Minister herself. Insult to the living dead. Worse is to come, though, if she ever manages to muster enough support to resign to be replaced by a more vicious version of the Bullingdon Club. Something worse than the current government is
Wrong button, wrong button.
about to be ushered into office by some useful idiots in the Labour Party who have stood in this chamber and preached about principle, about how damaging this deal is. Now they pretend to have found some substantive change which makes it the best possible deal of all possible worlds. They stand on the wrong side of history and on the wrong side of the interests of the people they were paid to represent.
This can only
now,
go
I
well.
represent a constituency opposed to Brexit, and I am proud to say that I agree with my constituency. We want to keep our links with the EU because we understand the benefits of that, and especially the benefits of freedom of movement. 10% of the population
in the last
of
3
Edinburgh North and Leith
years.
are non-UK citizens of the EU, more than twice the UK average. We also have higher numbers than average from elsewhere in Europe and from elsewhere in the world. We also have a higher number of immigrants from England than the Scottish average. Every one of them is welcome. We understand the benefits of immigration and the cultural and economic value that immigrants bring. We understand just how damaging Brexit would be, particularly a chaotic Brexit. This deal, this pile of manure we are being offered as an
advertiser
okay, I agree with her on
for
this
this
point.
flurry to come would do harm to my constituents. It is offered by a Prime Minister who has run out of road and who has no other ideas. That is no basis on which to recommend anything to anyone, far less a future to our country. It is time to go back to the people and say, this is what Brexit actually is. Would you like to go through with this, or would you rather revoke Article 50? Let them have a choice with at least some idea of what the choice actually is.
See, now I would agree with her, but her choice is yes or no, not yes or
it's
different
not that challenging
yes.
to follow. It's a shame to be back here on the back benches, Mr. Speaker, after 3 years, and I may have been down there on the front bench, but I've sat through a lot of these debates, and it seems to me that the Honourable Lady is about to prove my point, that people in this House have spent far too much time listening to respond instead of listening to try and understand. And the entrenchment of positions, as my honourable friend from Taunton Dean said earlier, is part of the problem. Now, my constituency, there are many that voted Remain. Probably the majority. There are many that voted Leave, and there are many that weren't old enough and decry the fact they didn't get a chance to take part in. But if we must leave, then we must do so with a withdrawal agreement, is their view. And if that's your position, and that's been mine since day one, then you cannot wish away no deal. And so that's why I've supported the Prime Minister's withdrawal agreement twice.
Why?
But I came to the conclusion, Mr. Speaker, that we can't just keep hoping that that withdrawal agreement gets over the line. And from the speeches I've heard in here today, I think it is unlikely it will get over the line today.
I don't actually know what my poll numbers were, but I'm going to reference them as a vague sort of, I think it was this.
Which is what I left the government to support earlier this week. And it was never going to produce a conclusive result on Wednesday. We never expected it to do so. But if the withdrawal agreement part falls tonight, then Monday becomes more important than ever. And if you don't believe in leaving with no withdrawal agreement, as I don't, and I believe the Prime Minister doesn't, and many, many people in this House, a big majority in this House, it's because you want to respect the result of the referendum, whether you regret it or not, but you want to do so in a safe way and produce a safe exit from the European Union. A people's vote, a revoke. People write to me all the time and say it's very obvious we need to hand it back to the people. That will solve this.
No, it won't.
It might produce an outcome, but it isn't consequence-free, as was voting against the withdrawal agreement the second time and tonight. There will be consequences to whatever this House decides tonight. So
the government can't. Right, okay, if you can't get 600 people to agree on something,
is the right
getting what 50 million to agree on something is probably going to be about as difficult.
A constitutional arrangement with the EU into a treaty arrangement. And my honourable friend from Cheltenham put it very well earlier when he said that the key points is simplicity. It's about the financial settlement, because this is a country that honours those financial settlements. It's about citizens' rights, which matters greatly to me and to my constituents. And it's about the implementation period that business was crystal clear it needs to deliver that safe exit.
Can't help but feel he's talking out of his arse in some of those points.
I commend the honourable member for Winchester, and I very much
It
hope
is very
that he will now
important to my
join the all-party
constituents
parliamentary
that other
group on
people's
acquired
rights are
brain
held.
injury,
Well,
since he's got some
I
spare
suppose,
time.
but that doesn't
Round
quite
and
sound
round
like,
and round and round we go. It's not so much a stuck record, it's like a record played at the wrong speed is what it feels like at the moment. And frankly, it's about time we change direction. I'm going to vote against this today because I think it's a pretty... the Minister looks depressed and upset, like I've let him down terribly. But the truth is, this is a ludicrous attempt at a body swerve by the government. And this House decided in this parliamentary session what was the proper process for proceeding. First of all, a meaningful vote on the withdrawal agreement and the political declaration all in one. That's what this House decided and enacted in this session. And secondly, that there should then be an Act of Parliament to implement it. Now, I feel that what the government actually intends to do is to use the Withdrawal Agreement Implementation Bill to repeal Section 13 of the Withdrawal Act. And yet we've already made that decision about what the proper process is in this session of Parliament. So I don't think that they will be able to do so, which is why today doesn't provide more certainty, as the Attorney-General argued, if we pass the motion tonight. It provides more uncertainty because we will still have to go through the process of a full, meaningful vote. The Prime Minister, up until this moment, has always agreed with me on this point. Her manifesto expressly says that the political declaration and the Withdrawal Act must be taken together. Her manifesto says it, and she's always preaching to us about manifestos, so I'm preaching back to her. She also said repeatedly, nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. And I agree with the Right Honourable Member for Stone that we should never be separating out the divorce settlement and the custody of the children. The whole thing has to go together. That is an intrinsic, fundamental principle. Now, there may be good reasons for voting for this motion, and I fully accept that many ministers, I accept that ministers adopt them. But it worries me that so many have said that they absolutely loathe this deal, but are nonetheless intending to support it today. Those are not good reasons. The European Research Group said, of the agreement, we will become a vassal state, many of whose laws will have been created abroad and over which we have no influence. How could they possibly vote for this? This is a constitutional crisis. We need a settlement that will last for generations. There is a deep, deep wound in the body politic, and a sticking plaster really won't suffice. We need to stitch the nation back together, and we can only do that if we proceed in good order. No more parliamentary shenanigans, no more partisan jiggery-pokery and behind-stairs work, no more subjugating the national interest to private ambition. Mrs. Anne Main.
I think I agree with that point, but he said a lot of long words.
Two certainties, death and taxes. Well, I'd like to add one more to the list. The certainty is that this House is a Remainer House. This House will resist kicking and screaming every opportunity to try and take this country legally out of the European Union. And I have listened to every speech in this House today, so I'm pleased to be called. And I've made a note of some of the comments that have been made. And the Honourable Member for Loch Skye and Loch Arbour said the voice of Remain will be heard. We must stop Brexit. We will never accept Brexit. I have to say, those sort of comments, and I've heard other versions of them today, have changed the context for people like myself who voted against the withdrawal deal on both occasions. I find it deeply undemocratic that the method put in place by the Honourable Member for West Dorset suggests that we are having a voting pattern, which we've already had one of, where we are expected to vote in a half-an-hour slot on 8 or more options that we have not debated or tested in this House, that we have not had any legal information in this House, that we have not had the Attorney-General's view on this House, that we have not run past the European Union to see if it's acceptable to them. And yet we're supposed to say that this is a democracy and that this actually is going to deliver a consensus. What it will deliver is a bogus consensus, because what will happen, particularly if this happens on Monday, that may end up becoming preferential votes, I don't know, could be it's an amendable motion. What we will have is, despite having 2 years of debate about this particular withdrawal agreement and examined its flaws in minutiae, and there are many, what we will have is the potential to go to something far, far worse. So the context of this has changed for myself, and I know for some other honourable members. This is a very, very difficult decision for many colleagues. But I know the siren voices from opposite, and there have been plenty of them. I have had 608 emails, as many do, on this topic alone, and I have had most of those emails, all but 80, are from the Remain side of the argument, because they see that this withdrawal agreement, with all its flaws, is the one way that they can stop Brexit. So today, I am changing my vote because I am not being cowed into going down a process that on Monday means I'm expected to make a choice over somebody else's selection of what they think Brexit should be. That I'm not going to choose on behalf of my constituents and the country as a whole based on something that's had no debate, no scrutiny, and because a Remainer Parliament is hoping against hope that this deal, which is the best of the ugliest of sisters, that this deal will be struck out today in the fervent hope that they can bring something far softer or not at all. And for all those saying about a second referendum, I hope they can explain to the British people how by the time they get one on the doorstep, it's current.
This is the third time that we have considered this issue. The government says this is not meaningful vote 3, and they will not count it as meaningful vote 3 if they lose today, but they would certainly count it as meaningful vote 3 if they won today. Now, a number of MPs today, honourable members, right honourable members, have said that they have changed their mind between vote 1, vote 2 and vote 3. And there'll be many people in the country asking themselves, why is it that MPs can vote 3 and maybe 4 times and are entitled to change their minds, but it would be the greatest democratic calamity of all, according to the Prime Minister, to give the public 1 vote on this deal and give them the right to change their minds?
Because no one could agree
and
what
two
the
things are different
referendum
about
would
how
be
we're doing
about.
this today.
Would it be about leaving or remaining? Would it be about May's deal or no deal? Would it be about, you know, what kind of aubergines they're having for dinner that night?
Is the starting gun being fired on a Tory leadership contest? Yes. The political declaration was already vague, but separating it out from the withdrawal agreement makes this the most blindfold Brexit. And we are being asked
I need to keep a better eye on my chat, but I'm just looking at the faces of the people behind who's talking, because it's a lot funnier.
Between the UK
I might actually try and pop it into a window.
And no attempt to answer the fundamental question
OBS,
that Brexit poses. Do we want a more distant economic relationship where, in all likelihood, Northern Ireland will have to be treated differently from the rest of the UK? Or do we want a close economic relationship where we continue to obey the EU's rules, yet give ourselves no say over them? That question must be answered. And now we are being asked to give all of this, to mortgage all of this, to the outcome of a Tory leadership contest, where the battle will be between candidates trying to prove that they are the truest believer of all. Exactly. Mirror, mirror on the wall will be the question. Who's the most right-wing nationalist of them all? That is what the candidates will be asked. That if the Prime Minister wins tonight, I would contend that the battering ram approach to parliamentary democracy will still not bring the country together. This has not been good enough as a process.
I'd be watching from the Parliament link, but it's like half an hour behind and loads like utter garbage. Can't imagine why. It's like the EU link.
The Prime Minister will have to decide on the future, a longer extension and a recasting of the process if this goes down tonight.
Johnson.
Speaker, I was rather hoping tonight to be able to crack open some champagne and celebrate the United Kingdom leaving the European Union. Sadly, Mr. Speaker, I'm more likely to be reaching out for the antidepressants as a consequence because we're not leaving the European Union, and that's because Brexit has been treated as a problem and choreographed by people who do not have their heart in it rather than an opportunity to be grasped. My vote on this issue has always been to implement Brexit, and it will continue to be so. We need to restore the sovereignty that we've lost to the European Union over the last 40 years. And that's why I voted against extending Article 50. I voted to keep no deal on the table, and I voted twice against this deal, which has so many fundamental flaws in it.
Okay, I think I've got a decent setup now.
Mr.
So I can see
Speaker,
chat, I can see it on full screen, and I've got my game.
Has voted to take over control of the order paper.
You know,
we've seen how it's wanted to extend Article 50.
This is a lot of words for not much actual
and to consider a customs union and even no Brexit. And I believe that we will witness the softest of soft Brexits, if at all, if this deal falls today. There are some who believe that still that if this deal falls, that no deal can somehow happen. That the European Union will, instead of accepting £1 billion a month off of us, will refuse to accept an extension of Article 50. I simply cannot see that happening at all. On the contrary, I believe if we vote against the government today, the European Union will extend Article 50 for a lengthy period of time. So we have a choice, Mr. Speaker, today, to accept this deal and all of its faults, or to risk losing Brexit completely. There is no certainty in either direction
honestly,
today. It is a balance of risk,
no
as has often been said on both
deal.
sides of the House. But I fear,
Anyone who disagrees with
and my
me, feel
greatest
free
fear
to tell me why
is
that's
that
the
we
case.
lose Brexit entirely if we
my
vote
view of
this
it
down
is,
today.
it is
And
better
that's
to
exactly
have no
what could
Brexit
happen.
than no.
I agree with many of the
deal
criticisms that
on
have
the
been
table.
levelled against this deal, the impact that it will have on Northern Ireland and the lack of ability for the UK to lead unilaterally. My decision to vote for this is in some ways harder than the decision I took to resign from the Whip's office. But circumstances have changed. I have not. We are now between a rock and a hard place. It is an inevitable, an unenviable situation that we find ourselves in, and we should not have been put in this position. It is this deal today, or we submit ourselves to a customs union and the potential of losing Brexit forever. I believe passionately that Britain's best place is outside of the European Union, and that's why I'll be voting with the government.
Then why the fuck are you voting for the government's deal if you want to be outside the EU? It's Baxeldom!
This morning
Did you
and this
not
afternoon.
read
What a
it?
catastrophic strategic failure of leadership we've seen from the government to reach this position. A position where, as Parliament, we remain divided, and we remain divided.
It looks
as
like
a
one of my
country.
old, like,
I was
tech
extremely
teachers.
disappointed that the reaction to the indicative votes that took place the other day, instead of the government responding to that and looking at that and saying, does that offer us a way forward? Is there a way of bringing those together which would actually command a majority of this House and command a majority of the country? Instead of that, we got the government crowing from their front bench that no particular option had got a majority. That is no way to bring the country together. That is no way to bring the Parliament of this country together. And I say to the government, even at this late stage, they should be seeking to look to see what would command a majority in this House and what would actually command a majority in the country. But instead of that, what do we get? We get a motion today which this House is asked to pass, and I'll be voting against it with many of my colleagues, asked to pass, which sets aside Section 13 of the EU Withdrawal Act. It sets aside the British law. It sets aside the law of this country, which says the withdrawal agreement will be passed with the political declaration and will be passed with the consent of the House of Commons and the House of Lords. Let me say this to the Minister and to the Government. I think the British public will be astonished that the Government, in order to push through its withdrawal agreements, even though it's been defeated twice, has come up with a ruse which allows it to say we will separate out the political declaration and we will set aside for our purposes the British law. They will not understand it, and frankly, neither do I. Let me say this as well. The political declaration, the people of this country should know that if the Withdrawal Act is passed today, there is no certainty about what that means for the political declaration. No certainty about single market, no certainty about customs union, no certainty about many of the other things that matter to the people of this country. As I said at the beginning, it is a catastrophic failure of leadership by the government and a continuing failure by the government to seek to bring Parliament together and this country together.
Free Clifton Brown. Speaker, I'm very grateful to catch your eye in this important debate. I'm sure my constituents will have noted my assiduousness, having been here for over 4 hours to speak for 3 minutes. An improvement on last time, it was 2 minutes after 4 hours. Mr. Speaker, I had hoped, listening to this debate today, this historic debate, that we might see honourable members and right honourable members in this House honouring their manifestos and the last election to actually honour the result of the referendum to leave the European Union. But actually, having listened to the debate today, it sounds as though that's going to be unlikely. And therefore, we're likely to move to indicative votes on Monday, Where I suspect the common consensus emerging is that there may well be some form of a customs union. Just my honourable member, leave it for a minute. Many members of this House believe that this may be a way out of this whole conundrum. I have to tell the House, Mr. Speaker, it most certainly is not, because it will not eliminate the needs for customs checks. There will still be a need to be checks on plants, animals, regulations and standards. The UK would be similar to Turkey, and we would need movement certificates for all goods that are going to be exported to the EU.
I'm grateful to honourable friend.
No, it's the EU's problem or our problem?
During the Maastricht debates. And isn't there a political judgment to make today that if we do not vote for the withdrawal agreement, we may never leave the European Union at all?
My honourable friend reads my mind, and I'm going to come on to precisely that subject in a minute. But above all, the EU will require checks at the Northern Irish border. So I say to my good friends in the DUP, a customs union certainly will not solve the Northern Ireland problem. Crucially, if the customs union is accompanied by closer alignment, for example with Common Market 2 or EEA or EFTA or Norway Plus, this means that we would have to honour EU competition laws, laws on state aids and customs legislation. Well, this means that the Labour Party's policies on nationalisation will be illegal under EU law, so they will be facing two ways at the same time. If we vote for this withdrawal agreement today, we can come to full trade agreements with high-growth countries in the rest of the world, none of which, sadly, are in the European Union. Coming to my honourable friend's point, the alternative, I believe, to not voting for this withdrawal agreement today, and all it does, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is take us to the next stage, to the withdrawal and implication bill, which can be fully scrutinised by this House, it can be fully amended, but the problems that my honourable friend for Stone has outlined about not leaving the European Communities Act, all of these things can be rectified in that bill. But if we don't get as far as that bill, we will go back to the indicative process. So coming to my honourable friend's point, I believe the alternative is to risk a long delay in Article 50 after April the 12th. This means, crucially, we will fight European elections. Fighting European elections almost 3 years after the British people voted to leave the European Union. And then my prediction is that we will finally go for a long extension of Article 50, during which time everybody will say we must revoke it. Our trust with the British people will then be broken.
That's right.
Democracy and faith in this Parliament will be severely damaged.
Right.
I urge all colleagues to vote for this agreement today.
Yes.
Oh,
God. Mr. Speaker, Britain can leave the European Union in one of two ways. We could choose to reject
you make some good points. You make some good points. You make some good points, and then you shoot yourself in the
to our
face.
economy, highlighted by Honda's Swindon plant closure, cancellation and Nissan models in Sunderland. Recent votes, I think, show the House rightly recognises that danger of no deal and isn't willing to go down that road. The alternative is to protect the economy, stay close to Europe, but the problem with that is having to apply EU rules, but no longer having any say over what the rules are.
But some of these rules are just generic. Everyone has to abide by them. Like, they have to abide by our rules if they're trading with us.
Reduce the economic hit, but have no say over the rules. Now, Mr. Speaker, one of the reasons we're in the problem we're in today is we do not know the Prime Minister's choice. We don't know which of those two she favours. The political declaration was supposed to tell us, but it doesn't. Even if we did know the Prime Minister's choice, she's stepping down, so someone else will have to make it. But I do understand the Prime Minister's unwillingness to choose. Both options have severe downsides. That's why many of us opposed leaving the EU in the first place. But how can we sign off the deal without having some idea of where we're going to end up? All we do know is the Prime Minister's choice for the transition period, that is, for that initial period to stay close. We'll gain control over migration from the EU, but we will lose our influence over rules we'll have to adhere to on data privacy, on financial services, on product standards in a whole host of areas. Some, I think, worried about migration from the EU may think that is a reasonable exchange. I cannot see that it is. One example, Mr. Speaker, to illustrate the problem. We've conscientiously implemented GDPR data privacy rules. The UK played a key role in drawing them up. The Prime Minister rightly recognises we're going to have to continue to follow them so we can carry on exchanging data easily with the EU. So she announced she wanted to keep our place on the European Data Protection Board, which oversees GDPR. But she couldn't achieve that in her negotiation. Under the withdrawal agreement, we'll lose our place on the day
people
we
give
leave
an
the EU.
outline of
We'll
what they
no
were
longer
intending
have
to
any
say,
on the
and then
rules,
they
but we
tell you
will
why,
still have
not
to
saying
comply
why, and then
with them.
eventually
And
what the
writ
point
large,
is.
that is the position we'll find ourselves in across the board. Mr. Speaker, we do need a longer extension. We need a consensus-building process which is going to take time, and I urge the House to reject the deal today.
Sir Mike Penning. Much, Mr. Speaker, and I've sat through the debates this afternoon. I'm not going to take any interventions because I want colleagues to get in as well. We need to talk about trust. The British public are fed up with Brexit, and they're fed up with us. The vast majority of us in this chamber stood on a manifesto to honour the referendum result. I respect those that didn't, but the majority of us did. But this House, whether we like it to admit it or not, is a Remain House.
Absolutely.
The Labour Party would like to bring this government down, and they quite clearly see this as an opportunity to do that. That's an opposition's job. I can understand that. We was in opposition for long enough. But what is fundamentally wrong is standing on a manifesto to say you honour the referendum result and then do every single thing you can in this House to delay, change, make it soft, do whatever other language we want to use to do that.
He sounds like an MP from
I'm not going to
North.
give way. I've already said I'm not going to give way, and I'm not going to give way so there's others. We can build the trust again in the British public, but we can only do that if we compromise. Not compromising like the Scottish National Party we were talking about earlier on, which is we don't leave. Not saying we want to be in a union. Not saying, yet again, I'm so popular, Mr. Speaker. But actually, I'm pleased the Prime Minister's here because this is fundamental. If there are people that are in the leadership campaigns and want to replace the Prime Minister, for God's sake, put that in the back burner till we get this through. We are not voting this evening on the bill. What we're doing is voting to get onto the bill so we can have the amendments, we can have those changes that so many colleagues are concerned, including my friends from Northern Ireland. Colleagues stood on a piece of paper that said, I will honour it. They will have to go back to their constituencies and say, I have honoured the referendum result as I promised you. I will have to go back and say that I've compromised because I don't like the agreement. Most of us don't like the agreement. But it's a damn sight better than sticking two fingers up to the British public and say we can ignore you. And that basically is what is happening for MPs in this House whose constituents voted to leave, not with caveats, not with bits and bobs, leave or stay, and leave is what we should do. But I am petrified that this House is going to block the will of the British people, which is why I will support the amendment to the motion this evening.
Jeremy Corbyn. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government has run down the clock in an attempt to blackmail MPs at every turn. This government is in chaos. The country's in chaos, and the responsibility for this chaos is the government's and the government's alone. The Prime Minister pulled the meaningful vote in December because she knew it would fail. And since then, in more than 3 months, nothing has changed. Not one single word in the 600 pages of the withdrawal agreement, not one single word in the 26 pages of the political declaration has changed. Today, Mr. Speaker, the government is trying to bounce this House into voting for a damaging deal that we have twice rejected. But as ever, the Prime Minister refuses to listen. Today's vote, third time lucky, the Prime Minister hopes, is an affront to democracy and an affront to this country. Separating the withdrawal agreement from the future relationship when the Prime Minister told us the two were indivisible. This is what she said to the House on the 14th of January, and I quote, "The link between the political declaration and the withdrawal agreement means that the commitments of one cannot be banked without the commitments of the other." Today, the Prime Minister is asking us to take a punt on the withdrawal agreement and hope the best for a political declaration. It's not good enough. The two are linked. And nothing, Mr. Speaker, demonstrates that linkage more than the backstop. The reality is the political declaration is incredibly vague, and there are, in it, I quote, "a spectrum of possible outcomes. Nothing is even close to being resolved." That makes it even more likely that the UK would fall into the backstop, which creates regulatory divergence between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK, as the Honourable Member for East Antrim said. And we know, Mr. Speaker, it endures indefinitely thanks to this Parliament prizing the Attorney General's legal advice out of a very reluctant government. Labour will not vote for a blindfold Brexit, and passing the withdrawal agreement today without the political declaration would be to do just that. The Prime Minister said at the end of November, when she signed off the deal, "We won't agree the leaving part, the withdrawal agreement, until we get what we want in the future, because these two go together." And as the Honourable Member, my friend the Honourable Member for Edinburgh South, said in his speech, it would be selling the House without knowing where we're moving to. Although, unlike me, I'm really not sure he's old enough to have watched Monty Python. Finally, yes.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very grateful indeed to the Leader of the Opposition for allowing me to intervene with him. The Leader of the Opposition should be enormously proud of the achievement of the Labour Party in the Good Friday Belfast Agreement. And therefore, I am extremely upset and very disappointed that the Labour Party today will vote against the Prime Minister's Brexit deal, which protects the Good Friday Agreement and the consent principle.
Mr. Speaker, we are very proud on this side of the House of the Good Friday Agreement and the peace that's been achieved in Northern Ireland as a result of it. And there's nobody on this side of the House in the Labour Party that wants to do anything to undermine the Good Friday Agreement and the great achievement that it was. The Shadow Solicitor General said Article 184 of the withdrawal agreement commits the government to negotiate expeditiously on the terms of the political declaration. That would be a deal based on a very wide range of potential outcomes to the country, and who would decide which direction we go in? Because now that the Prime Minister has announced her own departure, we do not know if we'll be getting the future chosen by the Honourable Member for Uxbridge or the Honourable Member for North East Somerset, or maybe even our jobbing Prime Minister, the Honourable Member for West Dorset. The Labour Party will not play roulette with this country's future, especially when the roulette wheel is rigged by the Conservative Party. Labour respects the results of the referendum. We reiterated that in our manifesto and again in our party conference last year. But this Prime Minister's approach to Brexit has been nothing short of a shambles. The choices facing our country post-Brexit have been decided solely by what is in the interests of the Conservative Party, not what is in the interests of this country. The Prime Minister announced her red lines and went to negotiate without any consultation with this House, without any attempt to build consensus.
People agree with her, Corbyn.
Those red lines were opposed by the representative bodies of workers, businesses and industry, who are now, Mr. Speaker, tearing their hair out in exasperation at the incompetence of this government and the uncertainty they face.
She's not doing it right.
The first Brexit Secretary said he would get a deal that would deliver the exact same benefits as now.
On their key points.
The current Brexit Secretary obviously felt that's far too good for the country, because only 2 weeks ago he went in the lobbies to back no deal. and to oppose an extension. That would leave the UK crashing out in just 10 days' time with no preparations and chaos at our ports and airports, leading to a crisis in factories,
it's someone's
shops
job
and hospitals.
to have maybe, I don't know, done some preparation in case that happened, instead of just complaining someone else's problem.
Option that would make the economy
Can't imagine who would be responsible
worse
for
off,
that kind of thing,
but
though.
nearly
You know, I'd imagine we'd have to have some like kind of formally organised government
it's no
body.
Wonder, then, that
maybe
faced
for
with
we
a choice between the Prime Minister's bad deal and a disastrous no deal, the House.
Why do you know
this
that no
House
deal is
has given a
disastrous? At
clear
the moment,
no
the current deals
to
are
both,
vassaldom
repeatedly.
or no
the
deal.
government suffered the
Most
largest
people would go,
defeat of any in
that's a
parliamentary
nice, easy
history in
choice.
January. The Prime Minister said then, and I quote, "It's clear this House does not support this deal."
I wonder what the windows
So what's
taste
the
like in
government's
his area.
response?
He must know.
It's tried begging, it's tried bullying, it's tried bribery, and it's still defeated by the fourth largest majority in parliamentary history. The Prime Minister told us we must leave on the 29th of March and even wrote that into primary legislation. Then she herself voted against leaving on the 29th of March. So the Prime Minister then went to Brussels to negotiate an extension and almost unbelievably even turned that into another negotiating failure. This government's Brexit negotiations have been a litany of failure, culminating in today with a Prime Minister who's been forced to announce her own departure, only tabling half the deal she has negotiated. This really is a half-baked Brexit. When she became Prime Minister 2.5 years ago, she said it was her mission to deliver Brexit. She has failed. She also stood on the steps of Downing Street and promised that her government would tackle burning injustices.
I have heard you speaking
Since
in
then,
interviews
she's failed
about
every
how
test.
that it's a good thing.
Homelessness is up. Life expectancy is falling. Infant mortality is rising. Crime is rising. Police numbers have fallen. And this year's NHS has had its worst ever month on history. People waiting longer in A&E for an operation and to start cancer treatment. And just yesterday, we learned that more children are in poverty and the scourge of pensioner poverty is rising again. The job of government is to make people's lives better, and this government has failed.
No, it isn't.
A
No, it's not,
botched
Jeremy.
and half-baked Brexit deal, like the one before us
Not to make
today,
people's
would
lives
compound
better.
that failure. On
If it
Wednesday,
is, that
the
is
House sought to find an alternative,
an almost
a new
adorable
negotiating deal
position,
for
to
the
be honest.
government. Labour's plan, and I
Government's
believe,
job is not to
provides
make
the
your
best
life better.
compromise
It is
for a
to
deeply
deal
divided
with the
country
things that
and, in truth, a
people as
deeply divided
individuals
House.
cannot deal with
It
on
is
their
backed
own.
in
They have
large part
elected
by major
representatives.
organisations in industry and business and by trade unions.
Not
It's based around the
about making
certainty
people's lives
of a permanent customs
easier,
union,
perhaps.
close alignment with the single market,
No,
and
dealing with the
a
whole
dynamic alignment
fence.
on rights and protections.
And you know, it's
Mr. Speaker, Labour urged
maybe I'm just
support
some kind of libertarian.
for
Who knows?
4 of the options tabled by members of different parties on different sides of the House. We did so not because we'd be equally happy with each of those outcomes, because we recognise that we have to compromise to get this resolved. The whole House knows that the current uncertainty is damaging businesses, is reducing investment, and is costing jobs now and in the future. And the stress of people in work is palpable as you travel around the country and talk to people in all parts of the country. So I hope on Monday the House retakes control, that parties and members on all sides will enter
Right, I
into
think it's you
those
already took
debates
control,
and
and what you
votes
decided
in the
was
spirit
nothing,
of trying
because you
to
need to
find
have
an
a
acceptable
fucking plan. You
compromise.
can't just be like, I'm going to take
We
control.
need to get
Now
a better
what?
deal. The country deserves a better deal, and I'm convinced
What you want to
that a
do,
better
Jeremy,
deal can
as
be
leader of the opposition, if
negotiated.
you're so opposed to things
And
happening,
if members
it's
decide
very
the
simple.
chance for people to have a final
Get a
say.
consensus.
If we cannot
like
do that
a majority
on Monday,
consensus,
then I ultimately
then take
and many
the
others
power
will agree with
and
me,
then
say
act
no
on it.
alternative
Don't be like,
other
right, we've got
than
the power,
having
what are
a
we going to
general
do?
election to decide who rules this country in the future. Mr. Speaker, To enable the Prime Minister to have sufficient time to answer the
debate, everyone I've heard today speaking,
I say this
if they still have their seat next election, I will be amazed.
Today to act in the best interests of their constituents and to vote down this unacceptable deal. There are many people who fear for their jobs, fear for their industry, or whether they or their friends have a future in this country.
What's currently a bigger threat to my job? The EU.
To many people, however they
The
voted
EU
in
is
the
genuinely a
referendum
bigger
in
threat to my job at the moment,
2016,
because with the
they're
Article 13
united
coming in,
their stress and concern about their
that
future
basically
and their
removes
community's
my ability
future.
to do
We
my
need to rebuild
primary job,
our country,
because a
and
lot of my job
invest
is
in our communities.
sending
Too many
visual,
of which have been neglected,
things to
ignored,
my boss,
and underfunded
be like,
for years.
see, this work has been done, this thing needs doing, that kind of thing.
Brexit
And
deal,
I'd imagine,
like the one before us today,
if, all these platforms
would only
have
deepen those
removed
problems
their fucking
and those
accesses,
divisions. Mr.
I'm pretty sure
Speaker,
Facebook owns
this
most
deal,
of the platforms
even
that
the
use my
half of it we
day
have
job.
before us today,
That's
is
gonna
bad
be
for
a
our
problem?
democracy,
Can I say a
bad for our
problem?
economy, and bad for this country. And I urge the House not to be cajoled on this third-time lucky strategy and vote it down today.
Prime Minister!
That seems like a measured, reasonable response.
Mr. Speaker, this has been another impassioned debate on Brexit. I've stood here on many occasions over the past few months, answering questions and taking interventions from right honourable and honourable members. What I want to do in the minutes remaining is to set out the serious choice that faces us.
If it's your deal,
today should have been the day that the United Kingdom left the European Union. That we are not leaving today is a matter of deep personal regret to me. But I remain committed to the United Kingdom leaving the European Union, and that is why I brought this motion to the House today. There are those who will say the House has rejected every option so far. You'll probably lose, so why bother? I bother because this is the last opportunity to guarantee Brexit. And I say to all those who campaigned to leave, who voted to leave, who represent constituencies that voted to leave, indeed all of us who want to deliver on the vote to leave, if we do not vote for this motion today, people will ask, why did you not vote for Brexit?
Because it's not Brexit, Theresa. You're just signing away all that fucking rights to someone else who doesn't have to do anything.
We can send a message to the public and to the European Union that Britain stands by its word and that we will leave the European Union on the 22nd of May. And this is the reason.
22nd of May? That's an odd way of saying the 29th of March.
For the past few years. What has she possibly said to the 48% actually voted to remain?
Okay, what she said to 30% of the electorate who didn't
deal
vote.
That we have agreed, the arrangements and the proposals that we have put forward absolutely apply
More
to the 48%
people didn't vote
who
than
voted
voted either way, if I
because
remember.
they recognise
I wonder why that could be.
recognise the
Because they
necessary
don't
balance
care.
between delivering on the result of
Why
the
are you trying to
referendum
appease the people
while
who
doing
lost
that in
when
a
you
way
could try
that
and
protects jobs,
get the
protects
people who
livelihoods
didn't
and
even
protects
vote
people's
interested? They're the bigger majority.
Mr. Speaker,
You want to
last
appeal to
week,
them if you want to
the
turn
EU
anybody.
Council agreed
The way
that
is
Article
not to
50
go, well,
could be
these people
extended
voted
to
yes, these
22nd
people
of
voted
May
no. But all
if
these
the
people over
House
here who
approves
went,
the
I
withdrawal
don't
agreement
care,
this week.
they are the people you
That
need to
would give
appeal
us
to if you
enough
want to get
time
any
to take the
progress,
withdrawal
because
agreement
they
bill
are the
through
fresh,
Parliament. We would not have to hold
undecided
European
people.
parliamentary elections.
That's like going,
and
well,
we would leave
we've tried
the
to get all
European
these
Union.
hard right people to vote for
But
the
they
hard
also
left, and we've
agreed
tried to get all these people
that
to
if
vote
we
for the
did
hard
not
left, vote for
approve
the
the
hard
withdrawal
right.
agreement by tonight,
I don't understand why no one's changing their
mind.
mind.
The 12th of April. Not long enough to ratify
Appeal to the
a deal.
centre. The centre is
So
where you will
anyone who
get
wants
most
to
of your
leave with a
support,
deal
as long as you have
would have
any
to support
fucking
seeking a
modicum
further
of sense.
extension. Any such extension would probably be a long one, and that would certainly mean holding European elections.
Okay, what's wrong with holding
So
European elections,
approving
Teresa?
the withdrawal agreement today
If we're going to
avoids a
stay
cliff
in, we're
edge
going to need
2 weeks'
representation, aren't we?
It avoids European
Or are you
elections.
going to just try and avoid
It
that?
avoids a long extension, which would at least delay and could destroy Brexit.
Oh no, not destroying Brexit. Oh, how will I choose between vassaldom or no Brexit?
We do not need to agree the whole deal today, just the withdrawal agreement.
That's completely counter to your own fucking statement.
I believe there's an overwhelming majority in this House
speak as
for
the
withdrawal
representative and then talk
Three-quarters
out your
of
ass.
Conservative MPs backed it in the last meaningful vote. And opposition MPs I've spoken to tell me their problem is not with the withdrawal agreement, it's with the political declaration. So I want to address the central argument put forward by the Leader of the Opposition again this afternoon, that voting for the motion will enable a blind Brexit.
Yes, I was unfamiliar with that time of day.
Not, and for 3 reasons. First, if you want to leave with a deal, then whatever future relationship you want, it needs to sit alongside this withdrawal agreement. The withdrawal agreement is fixed. It is part of any deal. Second, agreeing this motion today is not ratifying the whole deal. That will only happen once the withdrawal agreement bill has passed through all of its stages in this House and the other place.
When's that going to be,
and
Theresa?
has received royal assent. What this motion today does is give us the time we need to pass the necessary legislation and complete the current debate which the House is considering about our future relationship. Now, the government stands by the current political declaration, but we're not asking the House to approve it today. Nor does today's vote prejudge or preempt the outcome of the process run by my right honourable friend, the member for West Dorset. In fact, for those options being considered, approval of this withdrawal agreement is a prerequisite. And third, in the next phase of negotiations, we've committed to give Parliament a significant and ongoing role in the process.
I can think of one good thing that's going to come out of Brexit.
Mr.
People are going to
Speaker.
see how fucked the current political establishment is.
Mr. Speaker, if you had selected the amendment in the name of the honourable member for Stoke-on-Trent Central and others, the government would have accepted it. And if this motion carries today, we will bring forward a withdrawal agreement bill that will include commitments to implement that amendment, and we'll discuss the specific drafting of that with those who supported the amendment. So by voting for this motion, members are not closing any doors. They will still have the ability, through the withdrawal agreement bill, to influence that future relationship. Today's motion is not about a blind Brexit. It is about a guaranteed Brexit.
No, Theresa, that's not what your deal
Today we can
is.
give the public and businesses the certainty. Today we can give the public and businesses the certainty they need. Today we can show we stand by our word. Today we can show that we can come together in the national interest.
Whose national interest, though, Theresa?
Today.
So I don't think people generally vote for
noise in the
vassaldom.
chamber. The Prime Minister is addressing the House and must be heard. The Prime Minister.
Today we can show we can come together in the national interest. Today we can take a step forward together. This is a difficult
Yes,
day
that step
for
forward is
members
apparently
right
off a
across
cliff.
the House.
Or possibly off of
I'm
a
asking
gallows,
members to take
depending
a
on how
hard
badly it
decision,
goes for you
and I
today.
know that. I'm asking some honourable members. Now I give way.
In her heart of hearts, won't she accept that this Brexit will make Britain poorer, weaker, more divided and more isolated? And the door she should not shut is the door of democracy. She should allow the people to have the final say if they want this shambles, because the Leavers in my area certainly don't.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I say to the honourable gentleman, as I've said to the House before, if he looks at the economic analysis and he looks at the different types of Brexit that could take place, he will see that the Brexit, the deal that delivers on the result of the referendum and has the best economic outcome for this country is the deal the government has put forward.
No, it isn't.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, I know that this is a difficult day for members right across the House. I'm asking them to take a hard decision, and I know that.
if
I'm
the
asking
billion it's going to cost if they extend past today
that is less than they
comes
hoped
out of
for.
their
And
pay,
that's not easy.
I'd imagine
I'm
that would
asking
get them
other honourable members on the opposition benches to help me deliver on the instruction of the British people. And that's not easy either.
Because they've got no one to blame but themselves on that front.
There are good Labour members opposite who are as determined as I am to deliver the Brexit that their constituents voted for. As willing as I am to make a compromise in order to move our country forward. And at this historic moment, for our country, it is right to put aside self and party, right to accept the... It is right to accept the responsibility given to us by the British people. And that is what I have done, Mr. Speaker. I have... That is what I have done, Mr. Speaker. I have said I am prepared to leave this job earlier than I intended.
Yes, you're going to run away.
Order, order! Our proceedings are being widely watched. Please let's treat each other with respect. The Prime Minister
10,000 people are watching the link I'm watching, if I recall.
Must be heard. The Prime Minister.
I have said that I am prepared to leave this job earlier than I intended to secure the right outcome for our country.
Then
and
why
when the
are you
division bell rings in a few moments' time, every one of us will have to look into our hearts and decide what is best for our constituents and our country. I give way to the honourable gentleman.
I'm grateful to the Prime Minister for giving way, and she's right to say that she has sacrificed her own position to try and get her deal through. But does she appreciate that in doing so, she is asking us to place our trust in who will follow her? And looking at the likely candidates, I've got to say sincerely to her, she may have sacrificed her career to put the country first, but there are plenty of people who aim to follow her who've always put themselves first above the country.
Okay, who is putting the country first in any of these negotiations today? I've heard about 3 people who talk good sense.
The numbers in this House will not change. The numbers across this House will be the same. The desire of this House to be able to have a greater role in the future will not change. I've made the commitment that I have in relation to the legislation in the Withdrawal Agreement Bill, in relation to the amendment from the Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent Central. This, in the next stage, it will be important that there is a greater involvement of Parliament to be able to ensure that as we move forward together, we get that right result for our country. But this is about our country. It is about our national interest.
Really,
as I say, everybody
me.
will have to... I'll give way one last time. I'll give way to the Honourable Lady.
Thank the Prime Minister for giving way. The Prime Minister said this is about the country. But with respect, Prime Minister, that is not how it's seen. Brexit, withdrawal agreement, referendum has always been about the Conservative Party and its
This House across all parties voted for a referendum. This House across all parties voted to trigger Article...
Yes.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I forget, of course, that the Scottish National Party always have a different view on this because they want to stay in the EU, they want to stay in the Common Agricultural Policy, they want to stay in the Common Fisheries Policy. No good for Scottish fishermen and Scottish farmers. I had said I would give one last time, but as I've just referenced the SNP, I will give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Well, it's some way to build compromise, Mr. Speaker, but why did she never come forward to the Scottish Government and the Scottish National Party, offer wide sweeping reforms and devolution for employment law on welfare, for example,
in order to give Scotland
Employment
the power
law
it needs
on the welfare.
to protect itself from the measures in her deal
this?
that it doesn't like. Instead, she stuck her head in the sand, and that's why she's got nowhere with the Scottish Government or the Scottish National Party.
The Honourable Gentleman, the Government has given the Scottish Government extra powers, and they're not using them. Except, of course, the power to increase taxes in Scotland for the United Kingdom. So I say to members this: if you want to deliver Brexit, this is the moment. If you're passionate about making sure that the United Kingdom leaves the European Union, back this motion.
No,
if you care
because
about
it's
our
not
union
leaving,
and want
Teresa.
a deal that protects it, back the motion.
That's like going,
If
I'm
you
going
want
to
honour
leave,
the
and then you find them half an hour
but want
later standing in
Parliament
the
to shape our
porch trying to
future
find their
relationship,
keys.
back this motion. It's the right thing for our country, it's the right thing for our constituents, and with all my heart I commend this motion to the House.
We'll have to have good luck finding her heart, then, I suppose.
The question is as on the order paper. As many as have that opinion say aye. Aye! Of the contrary, no. No! Division! Clear the lobby!
I think I just missed something. Sounds like a large group of angry sheep. So did anything just get achieved? I'm not sure. I'm gonna go with no. It didn't sound like anything got achieved. Oh dear. I think a motion was put forward, but I don't know what it was meant to achieve, if it actually did achieve anything. It just sounded lots of people making vague mooing noises. I'm assuming they've broken up for lunch. So.
Order. The question is as on the order paper. As many as have that opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. No. Tellers for the ayes, Andrew Stevenson and Craig Whittaker. Tellers for the noes, Thangham Debonair and Nick Dakin.
So, did we just see a politics? Because I'm not sure. Yeah, so did anything get achieved? Because my conclusion is mass derision, mass, I want to say insanity. The whole, well, it's my deal or it's nothing. but your deal is bad, so people don't want to vote for it. But if they don't vote for it, then you're calling them traitors and saying they don't even want a Brexit. This is quite the sight. I'm sure the Americans, I know, will be curious to see why this happened. Considering in their Senate a few days ago for the new Green Deal, whatever it is, they had someone talking about the ecological benefits of tauntauns and how they're carbon neutral. I do want to do that. I then want to cut. I'm assuming some of you have probably heard the statement, the blind leading the blind. About the mad leading the insane. I mean, at least, though, it does seem that there's more, you know, debate and discussion at the EU Parliament when I was watching that on Tuesday? Tuesday? I think it was Tuesday. They're just like, well, they're going to have vote. Good, nothing happened. Right, let's move on, Vade. Excuse me. There's nothing to see. I'm going to hide that window again for a bit. And yeah, that was a thing. So that was what? Nearly 4 hours of debates I've watched today, and the result of it was, before all the loud people turned up, that not really much had happened, and then the result of it after the loud people had turned up was even less. The whole, if you don't vote today, you're a traitor, but it's voting for a deal that is so bad that it's literally in no one's interests other than the EU's. But guys, this is our representative, you know, democracy. They've got our best interests. Oh dear. Oh my. I feel like doing SpongeBob text for the title if this goes the way I anticipate today. So my assumption today is that nothing will be resolved, the government will seek an extension, and then it will be business as usual with nothing actually ever changing. Other than us then paying £1 billion a month. Which, as I said before, I do sincerely hope starts coming out of the MP's wages. Probably not in its entirety, I don't imagine they could afford that, but at least to some degree, to show they have some form of solidarity and intention of keeping things moving forwards. To actually, you know, go, well, it's going to affect us, you know, personally and financially if we don't actually get our fucking act together. So they will elect to take that financial hit. Of course, that will be voting not in their own interest, so I don't anticipate it actually happening, but...
Lock the doors!
Oh. Something's happening. Oh, yeah, they're back. Right, let's switch OBS back up. They have apparently locked the doors. As the Mr. Speaker was very loud in proclaiming, pop out the chat. There we go. Now imagine how this would go if there was no video feed of this, no, for want of a better word, civilian oversight. Right, so I've got a little defensive perimeter up. To my viewers, we're here for Factorio. I hope you're enjoying it. To my viewers here for the Article 50, I don't see how you can be enjoying it, but I hope you're at least being entertained. Because this is a fucking shambles. Going out to that little stone line soon. No trains at the station. I'm pretty sure that after Article 13, this entire stream format will become illegal. Not only am I sharing two different people's intellectual properties, but, you know, I'm having the affront of live streaming it. Apparently is likely to be banned under the proposed article, which it seems will apply to us because we will still be EU vassals by that point. Yeah, so I have the options today of possible outcomes as far as I see it. I'll go from least to most likely. Least likely, no deal. Then, possible referendum to decide whether we go no deal or May's deal. No referendum for no leave or May's deal. Then I would say zero effect, and then possibly the most likely thing I reckon today, which will be May's deal goes through, just because people get sick of it. Here's hoping I'm wrong. Red lines. Oh dear. I didn't remember to do anything that I meant to over there. That's not good. Alright, get on with it.
Order! Order!
The ayes to the right, 286. The noes to the left, 344.
So I just hearing easy.
The ayes to the right, 286. The noes to the left, 344. So the noes have it, the noes have it. Unlock.
Okay.
Point of order, the Prime Minister.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I think it should be a matter of profound regret to every member of this House that once again we have been unable to support leaving the European Union in an orderly fashion. The implications of the House's decision are grave. The legal default now is that the United Kingdom is due to leave the European Union on the 12th of April, in just 14 days' time. That is not enough time to agree, legislate for and ratify a deal, and yet the House has been clear it will not permit leaving without a deal. And so we will have to agree an alternative way forward. The European Union has been clear that any further extension will need to have a clear purpose and will need to be agreed unanimously by the heads of the other 27 member states ahead of the 12th of April. It is almost certain to involve the United Kingdom being required to hold European parliamentary elections. On Monday, this House will continue the process to see if there is a stable majority for a particular alternative version of our future relationship with the EU. Of course, all of the options will require the withdrawal agreement. Mr. Speaker, I fear we are reaching the limits of this process in this House. This House has rejected no deal. It has rejected no Brexit. On Wednesday, it rejected all the variations of the deal on the table. And today, it has rejected approving the withdrawal agreement alone and continuing a process on the future. This government will continue to press the case for the orderly Brexit that the result of the referendum demands.
Doubt. Severe doubt.
On a point of order, Mr. Speaker, this is now the third time the Prime Minister's deal has been rejected. When he was defeated the first time, the Prime Minister said it's clear this House does not support the deal. Does she now finally accept that the House does not support the deal? Because she seemed to indicate just now that she's going to return to this issue again. On Monday, this House has the chance, and I say to all members, Mr. Speaker, the responsibility to find a majority for a better deal for all the people of this country.
Right then,
Mr. Speaker,
Corbyn,
the House has been clear. This deal now has to change. There has to be an alternative found. And if the Prime Minister can't accept that, then she must go, not at an indeterminate date in the future, but now, so that we can decide the future of this country through a general election.
Point of Mr. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We should all be aware.
Order the right honourable gentleman must be heard. Mr. Ian Blackford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We should all be aware of the responsibilities that we all have in this House, the seriousness of the situation that we are in. And I would say respectfully to the Prime Minister, she now has to accept that her deal has been defeated 3 times. And I applaud the members of Parliament on all sides that voted against the government's proposition. It is a bad deal, and we have to find a way out of the crisis that we are in. All of our constituents would expect that. We must give ourselves time, and I suggest to the Prime Minister, we now must look seriously at the option of revocation. We need to apply the handbrake to this process. And quite simply, Mr. Speaker,
I had such high hopes for that,
the Prime
man.
Minister has failed to take this deal forward. She
Why
does not
are
have the confidence of the House. The Prime Minister has indicated her departure. She should now go, and we should be having a general election.
Thank you. Yes, I'll come to the honourable lady. Point of order, Sir Vincent Cable.
On Monday, it is perfectly possible that the House may indicate a preference for one of the options, such as a customs union or a confirmatory vote, which are, of course, compatible with the withdrawal agreement. If that is the case, is the Prime Minister then open to listening to the view of the House and considering how we might have a longer extension to explore them?
I think the question was perhaps to some degree a rhetorical.
Bollocks. Come on. 11,000 people currently watching this live stream. No wonder it's crashing. Oh, good. Right. So... Sorry about this, I'm going to have to wait till this advert's over. Are we done?
Grotesque it looked when, frankly, she was looking as if she was willing to sell out the country's future for the price of some Tory MP careers in replacement for it. The idea that it was somehow sensible for MPs on the other side to say that they would suddenly change their minds about a deal they've been against for months because they thought they might have some career advantage from it. That is wrong, and it is contemptuous of this country.
But there is a degree of latitude on these occasions, but the Honourable Lady has stretched it excessively. If she wanted to speak in the debate, she might well have caught my eye, but she didn't seek to do so. Point of order, Mr. Nigel Dodds.
Speaker, could I urge the Prime Minister now to look seriously at what the right honourable gentleman, the member for Esher and Walton, said earlier in the course of the debate about the backstop issue. She knows that remains a problem. She knows that Michel Barnier and Leo Varadkar this week have said that in a no-deal scenario there will be no hard border. Please, Prime Minister, even now, as the right honourable gentleman said earlier, use the time constructively to get that matter sorted out.
Thank you. Order. I invite the whip on duty to move the agenda.
I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
Thank you. The question is that this House do now adjourn, and then the other going to say aye. The contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order. Order.
So my question to the chat: if they can have it such that the what's the word? Oh, the sound's cut out. If they can have it such that they can vote on May's deal 3 times, but it takes but 1 vote to take no deal off the table, What the fuck are they playing? Yeah, I believe at approximately 4 o'clock, Mr. Robinson will be. Is that it? Was that it?
House of Commons sound.
Oh God.
Commons.
Why do they have that noise as their 20,000 people watching? 20,000 people have just watched nothing happen. And now, well, that was 20,000 people when I last saw. It's currently down to 15 and dropping. So I'm just going to replay this clip.
Get on with it. Yes, get on with it!
I am enjoying this scene.
Get on with it!
Well, I think that's over for the day. At least for now. Okay, it might be that nothing's happening, but I'd imagine they'll be coming back. Let's have a look on the Parliament TV website. United Kingdoms have drawn for the... Is there a time frame for this? This live event has ended. Alright then, well. I think the takeaway from this is basically non-existent. The government have decided nothing at great time and noise. Got the line too.
Seeding will start shortly.
What?
The proceeding will start shortly.
It's not a surprise that nothing happened, but to see nothing happen live.
The proceeding will start shortly.
Oh?
The proceeding will start shortly.
Something's going to happen, but what?
The proceeding will start shortly.
Doubt. So, on a different
The proceeding will start shortly.
Because I try and run these streams for about 3 hours, and I don't believe... Yep, that was 2 hours.
The proceeding will start shortly.
Yeah, I'm going to mute that until it starts doing anything productive. Yeah, well, that was a thing. Hope everyone felt that that was a productive use of their time. I think that my the collection of nondescript alcohol I have in my fridge is going to be more of a consolatory alcohol than a celebratory one. Not that I'm attempting to encourage drinking to forget or anything, it's more the I bought a bottle of cider for either result, and I intend to drink that cider. But yes, so we have... I need to get a radar dish for that coal mine. What to do with the remainder of the day, because I don't know when they'll be resuming their presumably after lunch session. But for now at least there is not a great deal happening. Let's combine this tab with my other one. Yeah, no, the beginning of the debate was quite good. You know, you had the, I believe the backbenchers just having a, you know, polite, reasonable discussion about, in so many words, why they thought the people on the opposite bench were a bunch of bastards. But it was, you know, constructive. And then the Prime Minister and everyone else turned up eventually and were like, meh, 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 meh. And it turned into people standing up and sitting down a lot. Because apparently that is the way of it. It's most tiresome. However, it is pleasantly warm today, and I don't have too much to do other than watch the 3D printer. So, productive things I've been attempting to get done. Got lots of petrol production. Okay, so that's one problem fixed. So I've got plenty of plastic now. Now what's the bottleneck? Because that was the bottleneck earlier. I didn't have enough plastic. I've got plenty of everything in storage. I've got lots of water in the storage tanks. Something is being damaged. It is over there again. Yeah, laser turrets are not what they used to be. That is one of the main takeaways from this update. They make more sense, but they're not what they used to be. So I may have to start putting in conventional solid ammunition turrets. Yeah, all the trains are sitting in the station. The water train is doing about what was anticipated. The stone train is not actually doing anything yet. So, what's going on here then? Got plenty of copper. Alright, let's go and have a look at the actual outputting place and see what's holding things up. So we need more... what's it called? Go. I need more steel. Okay. Let's see what we can do to resolve the steel problem. Right, very simple. Turn that off. So that steel is now only fed into the system. I will, as a result, need to make a steel processing place. Can fit it in just there. Printing's going alright. I've got one batch done already today, the second one's mostly done. It's just more of the same. I need 130 levers and I'm printing them in baker's dozens. Because I expect to break a bunch of them when I'm cleaning them up, because they're very delicate in places. But if I were to assemble them and not just print them in one piece, it would make them even more delicate. So I am compromising by just taking a really long time. Not really a compromise, but you know. Right. How's the robots? Got 1,000 robots sitting idle, and pretty much all my construction robots sitting idle. Right, where's the... there he is. It is, rather. Bloop. And we should have, as a result of this, a steelworks. Yeah, I might start on the roof later, but you know, my system so far has been, while watching the political debates and whatever, playing Factorio in the background. Because I don't have to concentrate as much on this, I can just, it's something to look at when there's nothing much happening. Whereas with my actual work, I get quite engrossed in it, and you know, I don't want to miss things. And my other actual work I am not doing today because I haven't got anything to do. Technically I should be doing some painting, but after the doctors very kindly rearranged my rib cage for me yesterday, I'm gonna have to take it easy. Much as I would rather not, because it's a lovely day to be painting. It's lovely and warm, you know, pleasant, all that jazz. So, I have done some efforts to repair the steel situation. Has it worked? Yes. Yes, it has worked. We have a little backup box there, just to keep the system topped up, as at the end of the day, the majority. I was saying, it's a lovely warm day, so it'll dry. There's more the interest. I've got model painting I'm meant to be doing, but it is actually too hot to do model painting, because that stuff, you don't want it to dry too quickly, because it dries very thick otherwise. And that paint is quite expensive in comparison to like the you know, interior paint that I use for my maintenance job. Not a fan of having to have this much time off. It's boring. So, anything else is slowing down the system. Apparently, that single factory is capable of producing almost all of the circuitry I need. I'd be quite tempted to put the iron down a separate belt, but this works. I'm going to say all the factories are ticking at least. Really not delivering much to there. Not all of those factories are going, but then again these aren't either. Let's deactivate that. Now it should only fill up what is required. Let's have a look. Yes, Parliament is still let's go back to their front page. Coming up. 2:30 p.m. Monday. Really? That's... Huh. See, I was expecting there to be something else today. Presumably they're not doing it as a live event. But yeah, Monday the 1st of April is the next thing coming up for the House of Commons. So... just update my title. Well, that was... I'd say nothing really achieved. The whole nothing ventured, nothing gained could also be said, but nothing gained, nothing at all ventured either. The May's government still seems determined to try and get her awful bill through, and pretty much everyone else seems very opposed to it, which I can't really blame, because it's trash. However, the fact that everything else has been taken off the table, shall we say, doesn't seem the appropriate answer. It seems much more that when given the choice of trying to, you know, make some progress or continue to twat around for a while, twatting around has been the majoritively upheld position. Huzzah. There's me thinking that the EU politics was painful to watch, as it doesn't happen. Yeah, I don't... well, at least according to their own website, there's nothing else happening today, although I gather there's a vote this evening, but I'm assuming that won't be televised, then. Presumably, to... as either the people who would do the filming for it would not be around, or not available, or it's not a thing they do. But I kind of feel like it would be relevant. But yeah, I think I'm going to set an alarm for 11 o'clock. And I will potentially try and prepare some nice little montage to put up on my channel. Because that's the thing, for all of the people who are going, oh, you know, we should have a second referendum, they're sort of correct, but not for the right reasons. Because I do feel that if the government is going to intentionally delay it beyond, you know, the pre-agreed point, then there should be some kind of public oversight on it. Even if it's just the, you know, as to what extent. Because at this point, it is just the Parliament deciding what is best for everybody, as opposed to... and then saying, see, it's the will of the people that we are deciding these things for them. Which, you know, seems a little insulting, if nothing else. Also the whole, well, we've taken all our negotiating points off the table, but we're pretty confident that we can get this through. And it's just like, oh, do fuck off. You know, this farce is just prolonging it makes us look weak. I mean, if that's what you're going for, then fine, but it's not good for anybody. it doesn't help that even in like the sort of desperation to get something that resembles the democratic mandate through, they've basically thrown out all the good points they used to have. So like, even Mog is sitting there going, well, we should just vote for May's one. As if May's deal has suddenly not become, you know, a thing that he couldn't, like, even contemplate voting for. That's why, you know, people have gone, and yeah, there we go. Another traitor. People don't like, you know, feeling like they're being ignored. That's a fairly common thing, to my knowledge. And the government's current mandate of let's just hope that the public don't notice is, it's an interesting position to try and take. I think I'm going to need to do something with bullets. Yeah, I'll say 4 o'clock, there's going to be mass protests in London. I was looking at going to that, and then I had a quick look at the train tickets, because I hadn't known if I'd be able to go until, well, yesterday, to see if I could. £109 return. I don't need to pay that much to be disappointed. You know, I'll be okay. Right, so iron is getting a bit better now. Let's go and have another look at the problems. The troubles in the system, if you will, which are bound to resurface should I not pay attention to them. Like the UK seemingly going, well, you know, we'll just leave Northern Ireland outside, it'll be fine. Okay, so this is all working at peak capacity. It's all fully loaded, even if it's not fully working. So I do appear to need more of the lightweight materials. I can't words today. So what is limiting this? Steel. Of course it is, because I have one steelworks. So, on the front of that, that was all the research done. So, artillery's a good laugh. However, energy weapons are probably a good priority right now, as are train-related things. I guess mining efficiency and lab speed. Suppose artillery can go on the list, although that one's quite a cheap one. So, I say we're sort of in the end game at this point. You know, I've launched rockets, 2 in fact so far. It's gonna have these here. I'm just not gonna commission them yet. See you later, Joe. I say there's not much happening now. I say all the parliamentary stuff has apparently ended for the day. Kind of begs the question of how can the House, so divided, actually get anything done without finding some form of, you know, pleasant compromise? Because all the people were like, you know, we just need to come together and vote on the shit deal. you know, at least we can say we tried. And, you know, you wouldn't want to vote for that. Like, who would? So I need more iron being produced. Here I need 1 iron for every steel. Yeah, I'll say the Guardian's link was, ooh dear, nearly got run over. Was quite good. It didn't come out too often, despite 20,000 people watching, as the government decides nothing. Kinda begs the question that, as I say, tomorrow we start paying £1 billion. I'm pretty sure that's just happening at this point. So, yeah. It'll be quite interesting to see what would happen with that. Okay, as Ken Dankers pointed out 3 hours ago, after the independent group has become a political party, Change UK, he has gone, ah yes, the globalist cuck party. What a time to be alive. Yeah, I'm probably going to stop my stream and start looking at stuff. What's the word? And start just going through the less safe to stream topics. I think I will conclude with... So if we pay £1 billion a month to delay, should this come out of the MP's wages? They've had 3 years almost to come to an agreement. May's deal has been struck down 3 times, but no deal only once. 2 more goes, methinks. So yeah, so we've paid £1 billion a month to delay. Should this come out of MP's wages? They've had 3 years almost to, just checking the spelling, to come to an agreement. May's deal has been struck down 3 times, but no deal only once. 2 more goes, methinks. Is that only for referendums? Ugh, he does not look like I anticipated he would. Yep. I mean, this stream already contains probably a bunch of copyright material, so let's go back to things. We'll have the joy of seeing my Twitter. Every time. They can't help but get that chant in there, it seems. Let's see. Scrump. That's the outlawed Scrump on Twitter. Today could have been the UK's new Independence Day. Instead we simply have the slow grind of an incompetent political system failing to deliver the clear will of the people. House of Traitors. A Brexit delay is a Brexit denied. I need a drink. Well, let's so, chat, should I keep going and just try and top out the game stream at 3 hours, or do I just stop now and try and find some amusement, at least in Twitter? Because I'm good with either, to be honest, you know. I'd probably end up playing video games anyway. Now, let's have a look around, try and find some more bottlenecks, because that's the thing, the bottlenecks don't fix instantly, so I can't just sit there and watch it as if that'll make it better. Plastic seems to be good. Do need more green chips, but I seem to have plenty of red chips. Red chips appear to in fact be in large supply. Green, less so. The limiting factor on green is copper. I need more processed copper. And that plant's almost about to give out, so that's probably not a good start. So the intention was, at least, to try and keep all the processing plants for the raw materials next to the tracks, so that, what's the word? They don't have too far to go. Yeah, sadly, no more news on Brexit, because the parliamentary session is adjourned for the afternoon at least. I assume they'll be back this evening, but it doesn't have anything down on their agenda, so maybe they're just fucking off till Monday. So, you know. Here was me expecting them to try and resolve something rather than just go, well, we tried, fuck it, see you Monday. So I'm pretty sure Monday morning they're going to be sent the bill, as they will have delayed Brexit. Perhaps they will foot that bill. The protests today, I'm sure, will be vastly ignored by anyone who cannot see any gain in it. Oh dear. So I'm looking at Twitter and rain. Rain. Well, sorry, I'm zoning out just looking at the mess that is the political bits of the Twitter I follow. It's let's just say it's a bad day to be a politician in the UK. Which the answer for most people is probably ah ha ha, ah ha ha ha, ah ha 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 ha. Let's crank up another one of them. And another one of these. I'm gonna need more robots. And probably more charging towers nearby. But such is the nature of the beast. I had elected to use primarily robots for my processing capacity, so robots I will require. I can't produce components fast enough because I don't. Some of the core materials are needed in greater supply. Let's change that to a free. It's not currently at capacity, but if it hits capacity, then obviously not exactly a bad thing. Now I need to clear out that tower, so I've got space for more robots. Let's get on with this then. Now it's Friday today? Friday? Yeah, Friday. I'm paying attention. So I believe means Disc and I'll be streaming later. It used to be that Nucker would stream on Fridays, but he's not been able to do that for a while now. What else is Fridays? I think Ghost Poop Podcast, for anyone who watches that. I'd imagine most of these will in some way at least cover the topics of today, mostly what the fuck. It's very evident that the Parliament cannot come to any agreement to satisfy any portion of the public, as that's the thing. At this point, as I said earlier on in the stream, I would welcome a referendum that gave us the choice between the major options. And that would take some time, but at least, you know, it would be some input and not just sitting up being sidelined to, you know, basically sit on the naughty step. Because we voted inconveniently and now we must, you know, wait for our good kind-hearted overlords to decide how best to implement the public's opinion. That's the thing. No one is happy with this. Like, the Remain people would rather Remain than have May's deal. The Leave people, to my knowledge, would rather Remain than have May's deal. But the Leave people would prefer no deal at this point. And probably quite a few of the Remain people would prefer no deal to May's deal. Because, you know, that's like going, I have, like, you know, I've got 2 cans of Coke, so what I'm going to do, for balance, and to maintain the amount of Coke cans that I have, is to give both of the Coke cans to you, and then you get to decide if I get any of them back again. At which point they drink both the Coke cans and require a third. That was not a good analogy. Oh dear. Yeah, I think at this point, 2 hours 40 minutes, I've got nothing else to say. I mean, the game continues to go on like it has done. Have a nice day. I might start a new stream if anything else happens that's stream worthy. See ya.